Well, as was mentioned, I work for the Kino Border Initiative. It's a binational Catholic ministry, Nogales, Arizona, Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, working in humanitarian aid, education, research, and advocacy. Been there almost 11 years now. And last year, one of our staff people was reading a book. And it's a book by an author named Francisco Cantu. And the title of the book is The Line Becomes a River. And she recommended it to me, and I picked it up and I read it. And the book really has two parts. The first part is Francisco's experience of being a Border Patrol agent. After graduating from college, entering Border Patrol, going through the training, and then being out in the field. And the second part of the book is after he leaves the Border Patrol and goes to work in Tucson and befriends a man who he comes to discover later is an undocumented immigrant, who one day is arrested and deported, with his wife and children left behind. And this experience shakes Francisco to the core. And as he is shaken and moved, he responds by visiting his friend in Mexico, deported, but also taking care of his family left behind here in Arizona. And it's just an interesting dynamic that unfolds for him. Because part of what he talks about in the initial part of the book is how he's arresting people of his own heritage. In some ways, they're the same, but in some ways, obviously, very different. Separated by country, by situation, by context, by reality. We could all name the divisions that we see and experience and encounter in our country right now. Whether they be ideological, whether they be racial, whether they be socioeconomic, whether they be political. We're all too aware of even our own divisions within our church. One of the powerful qualities of Jesus is that he is regularly crossing borders. He is regularly crossing boundaries. Whether it's the call of Matthew, the tax collector, to be one of his followers, or whether it's sitting with a woman at the well who is going there because she thought she wouldn't meet with anyone because of the shame of her personal life. Jesus constantly crossing through walls, crossing borders, crossing boundaries, reaching out, connecting, being with. The theologian and author Ron Rolheiser wrote a book some years ago called Sacred Fire, A Vision for a Deeper Human and Christian Maturity. And he says this. He says, gratitude is ultimately the basis for all virtue and the basis of all holiness. That's the recognition that all we have is gift. As Father Page mentioned at the beginning of Mass, I'm a Jesuit. Please don't hold it against me. But there's one aspect of St. Ignatius as our founder's spiritual exercises that really kind of captures well this principle of gratitude as the basis of all virtue and the basis of all holiness. For the invitation is toward the end of the retreat for a person to reflect on the blessings they have received from God. How has God concretely blessed them? Through people, through moments, through experiences. And to allow that gratitude to swell as one remembers and savors those blessings that are received. And the additional invitation is that in response, to reflect on how one offers the gift of oneself in response to these gifts and blessings received. For it's the recognition that all we have is gift. That all we have has been given us by God. And as we recognize those blessings in our lives, and as gratitude swells in our own hearts, it is precisely that gift of gratitude, is precisely that memory of blessing, it's precisely that memory of God laboring in our lives, present, at work, alive, that helps us, and not only helps us, but empowers us to cross the various borders and boundaries that we encounter in our own lives. Because that gratitude casts out fear. And that gratitude is at the root of love. And gratitude and faith have this relationship where they work with each other hand in hand. Greater faith enhances gratitude, and deeper gratitude deepens our faith. That's what Naaman experienced. He experiences healing, he is grateful, and he returns to Elisha to give thanks for that gift and crossing a boundary of nationality. And the Samaritan leper, the one person for the people hearing the story that was most unlikely to return and give thanks, and yet it's precisely this person who crosses that boundary between Samaritan and Jew and expresses to Jesus his thanks and his gratitude. And it's Paul who speaks from the depth of his experience. Remember Jesus Christ raised from the dead, a descendant of David. That is my gospel, for which I suffer hardship, even to the point of being chained like a criminal. Gratitude has a power that literally drives us and moves us to cross through the various borders of our lives, whether they be racial, whether they be socioeconomic, whether they be political, whether they be perspective in our church. Do we recognize that all we have is gift, or do we feel entitled? Are our lives suffused with gratitude, or does an unhealthy fear enter our hearts at times? Do we allow gratitude to empower us to cross the different borders we encounter in our lives and encounter the other? 5 years ago, about 400 people gathered in Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. And it wasn't just any gathering. We gathered for Eucharist. We gathered for a Mass. Migrants, neighbors, residents, standing on both sides of the wall. Nogales, Sonora, Nogales, Arizona. And the most powerful part of that liturgy was the moment when it came time to receive communion. And as Bishop Kakanis and Cardinal O'Malley stepped down to the wall and held up the body of Christ, and people extended their hands through the wall to receive the Eucharist, it reminded us all that that gift of Jesus moves through borders. It crosses boundaries, and empowered us in that moment to do the same. And so as we come to this table and we receive that same gift, we are also given that same grace. And we are given that gift to be sent, to be instruments of that gift that is Jesus, present and alive in our midst and in our hearts. And as we receive him, and as that gift of gratitude fills us, we may also hear those words of Jesus spoken to us, saying, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well."